lecture was going to be, okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right. I thought this lecture was actually going to be a lot less information than what it is. And when I brought in more of the Western and then like fit it in with the Eastern and then study with my Eastern Western practitioners, it was really interesting to find that like the layers of information. So it ended up being a lot more than I thought. And just like everything else, I'm going to be breaking it down. And Jenna, like I texted you early today, I think that I'm going to rewrite this program again and do it a little bit differently. I think I'm going to break it up even more into segments, and it'll make it like little chunks to work on. So this has been fun to be able to experiment with creating a program and then saying, okay, I think we need to evolve it into this. So I think that the teachers program will actually be a good test group to do it on, because of the simplicity that it needs to be in order for them to incorporate it into their life. So, but it's putting in perspective some of the things I'm doing and some of the things you're doing, Jenna. So, you know, you're having some success with your routine. And so everything that I'm studying, I'm going to talk about today is reflecting what you're doing, because pretty much what I'm doing isn't that much different. I'm just going to start tweaking things around that I didn't think I would ever change back. So back when I was training for ultras, I was doing exercise early and then I would do my meditation yoga later. And I'm finding that now I'm doing my meditation yoga and then exercising. And I think I need to flip it back around. And I'll talk about why, because it's an interesting reason. And it's enough for me to even consider mine, because I really like getting up kind of in the quiet and then doing my meditation. But then I'm finding that from some of the statistics, like it's better to just move. And do you meditate first?
I've started doing that again, yes, because I would exercise too long and then not have time to meditate.
Okay.
So then I switch it back. But if you can convince me the other way again, I'd love to exercise first. Yeah.
The only bad part is that like our days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So now it's running up into, okay, do I go out in the dark? You know, because 5:30 is dark. And I don't like to exercise indoors, but then do you switch it up on different days? Because like some days I start at 9:30 and some days I start at 7. My work day. So I just have to look at that. But it'll be interesting to kind of talk this through, and then I'm going to start working on with some of my private clients is like their scheduling and building their routines now that we're getting some of the key pieces together. Okay, so you can go ahead and open with our meditation then, Jenna.
Perfect. All right, find a comfortable seat. Palms face down on your knees if you need just a little bit of grounding, or face up towards the sky if you need to receive some energy. And settle into your breath. Feel your breath coming in through your nose. And as you exhale, send it out throughout your body. Starting from the top of your head all the way down to your tailbone and to your feet. Notice if there's any areas of tension or soreness or maybe pain. Breathe into those areas. Take these next few moments to set an intention for our upcoming lecture and practices revolving our physical bodies. What would you like to work on? What would you like to improve? What would you like to learn? Now, once again, come back to your breath, inhaling in through your nose and exhaling out through your body. And notice but setting an intention if there's any changes to your physical body. And slowly open your eyes. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Very
You're
nice.
welcome.
Okay, so I'll kind of go back to the structure that I followed throughout the sessions this time. So I talked about the imbalances happen because of being exposed to toxins, microbes, and allergens, having a negative or repressed emotions, having an inconsistent schedule, being involved in troubled relationships, inappropriate exercise, nutritionally inappropriate diet, living against nature, and living against your constitution. So, like I've said before, we're not going to cover as much about the constitution in this particular part of the course, just because there's so many factors that fall into that. The basics still have to be, the foundation still has to be laid before we can even consider the constitution as part of the problem or solution. So what I'm going to cover today is we're going to cover exercise and how exercise is very different between Eastern and Western, but yet some of the information and research that is coming about circadian science or chronobiology is proving the fact of Ayurveda and why we do things a certain way and why we do things at a certain time. And there's lots of research around it now. Even some of the books I've listened to or some of the teachers' lectures that I've listened to are already outdated because some of the evidence that's coming out now and the research that's being done now around circadian clock has been so significant that it's actually changed some of that stuff. So it's interesting listening to some of my teachers, and I'm like, well, that's not quite right, because that information has been proven now. So it's kind of fun because I know that they know too, but it's interesting to say, wow, that was only a couple years ago, and we didn't even know there was a sagittal sinus in our brain that drains the lymph from our brain and flushes out our brain every single night. It's like that was just found a couple years ago. So this is pretty amazing that we're living in the day and age when Ayurveda and Eastern medicine practices are being proven by modern science. And ironically enough, a lot of this research probably should have been released or was done many, many years ago, but a lot of Western research is done and it's kind of filed away and it isn't looked at for maybe 10, 15, 20 years. And so some of the information that Ayurveda has to offer specifically, because I can speak from that point, is that the research that's proving the things, there might be a lot more that's hidden that we don't know. And so we're just doing the best we can as practitioners to be able to incorporate Ayurveda into our lives and then live that reflection and then recommend it out. So I know that COVID's definitely changed my life in the way that I can have a very consistent schedule, but you can still have a consistent schedule even if you have kids and even if you have things that go on in life, or a regular job where you still have to go to work, or you have other things in your life. You just make it a priority. And when we make things a priority, when we make our health a priority, everything else fits in. It really does. Jenna, how do you feel about that? Because you work a regular 9 to 5-ish.
Yes, yeah. And I had 2 months off from that 9 to 5, so that was when I did set my routine. And going back, working, and then having to work my yoga job and then my other job, I didn't have time to do both a whole lot. But I still set my morning routine, and I made that priority because I knew if I wasn't able to function well, I wouldn't be able to do either job well. And so I just made it a priority, and it's honestly made me a lot happier, and I've gotten a lot more done in both jobs in less time. So I approve.
Thank you, Jenna.
You're welcome.
It's easy to have my sidekick agree with me, but at the same time, she is an example because she's completely different constitution than I am. I've got more of the tridosh leaning towards pitta, and she's got more of the kapha vata qualities going on. So that's completely different than me. And that brings in a lot of great information, because if I can say, okay, Jenna, do this. And it's also interesting because working with clients, I've got clients that have money and I've got clients that don't. And being able to play with different routines and be able to build their routine. COVID was really good for me in my practice, because I've been able to immerse myself in study. And so, to not get too far off track or get into a rant about routine because of the importance of it, I will get into exercise. And interestingly enough, Jen and I are writing a program for school teachers right now that we're offering. And what is happening is I picked up this Time magazine, The Science of Stress. And Jenna hates it when I write in all my magazines and books, but I'm going to keep on doing that because I bought them and they're mine. So if she borrows them, she's like frustrated because it's like, there's writing all over. But I haven't written to this one yet. But the article specifically was how to handle stress. And it was interesting because exercise, of course, is one of the keys. And in Ayurveda, we talk of the pillars of health, sleep being number one always, and then exercise, nutrition. And then you can throw in other things like spiritual health in there too. So I think there's more than just the 3 pillars. Some go 4, some go 5. That depends on the practitioner. But we were talking about exercise. And so Western medicine, this article specifically says that the Department of Health and Human Services updated the physical activity guidelines for Americans. Recommendation for adults currently do 150 minutes or 2.5 hours of moderate aerobic exercise, walking, swimming, or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity, running, that kind of thing. Okay, so this is what Western medicine has come to be the most important thing. I'm going to totally debunk this one. I agree that it's on the amount of time. Only I agree I think it should be more. In Ayurveda, we talk about how any movement is exercise. And in the society, anything is anything right now, because most of us, even if we're very active, so I have what I would consider an active lifestyle because I do chores in the morning. I've got my chickens, I've got my dog. Like I do my chores in the morning. I do my chores in the evening. So I have that part of my routine. It's not as active as my dad, but I exercise more than my dad. My dad's a farmer. So his whole life is around activity because he's not still very much, but he's more often going to be jumping on a 4-wheeler to get somewhere, where I will walk to go somewhere. So just looking at activity level as a part of that. And when we get to the later part of this lecture, I'll talk about why that's important in the sequence of kind of focusing on what you're going to do for your workouts and what goes around that. In this article, I was also really excited to see that they had wrote about yoga specifically. So they had said that, because this was focused on stress management and the importance of yoga, because it brings in pretty much all aspects of exercise. So the goal of exercise is to gain strength, to build endurance, and to build flexibility. So those 3 things are the most important thing. If you get those things in every week, multiple times, you will be healthier. All right. That's minimum. That's bare minimum. I throw in another one and I say lifestyle is the 4th one. So I have my own philosophy on this after building it from many different philosophies. And so that being said, yoga hits all of them except for like lifestyle stuff. I mean, it is a lifestyle because when we look at yoga from the big perspective, and I believe that's what Jen is talking about today, when we look at yoga from the big perspective, is that yoga is more than just the physical asana. But today we'll focus a little bit more on the fact that it's the physical asana portion for this part of the lecture. So yoga is probably one of the most complete exercises because it involves strength, it incorporates flexibility, and not necessarily endurance as far as compared to running, but it's building prana, which pranayama, breathing techniques are probably one of the easiest ways to get cardiovascular in a stress management way without engaging your fight or flight response. And that's another thing they talked about in here, was that although exercise is very good and vigorous exercise is important, there's a degree of the fact that your body does go into fight or flight. Your body releases adrenaline, then releases cortisol in the same way as if it's under stress. So this throws a little bit of a glitch in the system, because they actually told about it in this article. It's one of the first articles that I've seen them really say, you know, it does create a fight or flight response. But what happens is after you do it for a period of time, obviously you get in better shape, so it becomes less difficult. So those of us that have ever tried to go running, at first it's really, really hard and you're breathing real hard, and then it slowly starts to build up to the point where you can run and it should be less and less effort. And if you're doing pranayama techniques, especially the ones that I practice in my classes, they're very, very specific to building lung capacity, which is even more important, although the movement of our body is vital. So I thought that it was a very short part of the article. It was maybe only 5 paragraphs, but it really told a lot of information about what Ayurveda is doing and the importance of the way that we look at exercise. So I've got a lot of notes here, and I'm going to try to stay really focused on these notes. So if I look down, it's because I just want to make sure that I get the information. It's all in here. It's just, I want to make sure that I get it covered. So, and I also have charts up here. So the goal of exercise is to build strength, stamina, and resistance to dis-ease. So being uncomfortable, the precursor to disease. In Ayurveda, all movement is considered to be exercise, but we do emphasize that movement to a greater level is needed. So just going for a walk or doing restorative yoga is not going to be enough. It just isn't. So greater movement is needed because we still want to hit the points of what's important. We want to build strength, we want to build flexibility, and we want to build stamina. Okay. Eastern versus Western, I did talk about that. Ayurveda also takes in consideration the time of day, the time of year, and the time of life. So as we age, we want to look at yoga. We want to look at exercise very differently. I was an athlete my whole life, competitive athlete, high caliber, one of the top in the state. So I know what it's like to beat your body to the point of submission. And I was an ultra marathon runner, and I did not do that while I was running ultra marathons, which sounds really crazy because when you're running 50 to 100 miles, you'd think that you'd be depleting. And I really wasn't. I didn't feel extremely exhausted. I was tired after a 100-mile race, but I wasn't exhausted. I was actually like revitalized, and I had a lot of energy, and I'd stay and cheer for the rest, you know, for the rest of people that were finishing. And so it was a different experience for me because it was actually a strong connection with nature. The training was tough though. The training was more work, but it was a good community builder too. So we have to look at different phases of our life. And I did that in my 30s. And now that I'm in my 40s, and after I turned 40, I really did consider what's the most important thing. And I've talked about this many times before, is that I was looking at my age as not being that I'm older, but more so that I've got probably 60 years left. I've got many great grandparents that lived to be 90 to 105. So in that, I have to think, well, I'm going to live 60 more years. So what do I want that to look like? And so we all have to take that in consideration. Not everybody's going to live to be 100, but our bodies are designed to live for a very long time. We're actually designed to live to be about 120. So I don't see that happening as much in this environment. There will be certain people that will. I bet you some of my teachers will, because they have a very structured, very Ayurvedic clock. My great grandmother lived to be 105, and she was like clockwork. I mean, everybody talks about how much I'm like my great grandmother, and I can see it now because I remember going to her house and her chocolate chip cookies only had 2 chocolate chips per cookie. Yeah, we'll talk about pitta mind frame. But anyway, so getting back to exercise, our bodies are designed for movement. Movement is a crucial element for our vitality. So back in the day, we actually moved between 10 and 15 miles a day. How many of us get in 10 to 15 miles of movement a day. I don't even get in that much. So I have one of the watches that tracks my steps. My goal is always 10,000 steps per day. And there's a whole bunch of people trying to debunk that and say, oh, we don't need that many, or oh, this isn't necessary, or oh, this isn't going to work. And it does. I know that it does, because the last couple of years I did far less exercise, and I'm in not like training shape to be able to run marathons, but I'm very, very healthy. So to look at it as a more round perspective, if you're sitting all day, if you have a very sedentary life, doing 10,000 steps or even shooting for 8,000 and then shooting for 10,000 is a really good goal, because it's getting you off the couch. So I think that I believe that these things are probably one of the best inventions for our society, because if people realize how little they move, they would move more, I would think. Because it got me thinking, because I sit and I study for 4, 5, 6 hours. And then I'm like, wow, I only moved 3,000 steps today so far, or it was just my walk in the morning that I did. And so I look at that as, okay, then tonight I need to go for a longer walk, and at least just a walk. So getting those steps in is important. And some days I get in 15,000 because I'm doing chores and I'm, moving way more, playing with the chickens or active in other ways. So this is a part of Ayurveda, is movement counts. Movement is huge. It doesn't track as much if you do yoga. That's the one thing. It's like, oh, I don't get any steps for yoga. I worked out. Fine, whatever. But the idea of it, the concept of it is good. The goal is to recharge, awaken your mind, energize your body. So the idea of exercise is not to feel exhausted afterwards. So often when people go exercise, they'll go and they'll just get themselves completely exhausted. And that's not the idea of true exercise. True exercise brings energy and vitality into your body. Anytime you go beyond that, you're hitting those points of exhaustion, depletion, vitality burning away, ojas, which is the vitality of life. It's beyond the vitality of giving birth. So egg and sperm is considered the vitality of ojas in some cases. So we want to look at this as, okay, how can I create vitality while doing exercise? And that's why the movement is so important, and what kind of movement you do. And it is broke down according to constitutions, but we still have a foundation to be able to follow. So often we think that we move more during the day than what we do, but most of our jobs or our life is very sedentary. And we get to the end of the day and we feel exhausted. And it's really, our body is just bored. It hasn't moved. So it's picking up this, what we call tamasic state, this very sedentary, very stagnant state, and it's carrying it on. And then we have problems sleeping at night. Well, we have problems sleeping at night because we didn't wear out our body. Our body is all agitated and jittery because it wants to move. So we want to look at this as what's the bigger picture. Like I said before, our ancestors took in 10 to 15 miles per day. 10,000 steps is about 5 miles. So it's not even remotely close doing 10,000 steps. Not even remotely close. And we don't have to have that many, but movement is important. That's why now we almost need to take into consideration that we need different kinds of movement because our activity is less. So if we sit at a computer all day, or if we sit on the couch all day, or whatever, if our job is sitting or standing still all day, we want to take in consideration we need to alter that movement. So what would be the opposite of that? Jenna stands a lot during the day at her one job. So that means to opposite her wouldn't be to sit her on the couch for the rest of the night. It would be doing yoga and stretching out her muscles, because her, more than likely, the backside of her body is going to tighten up from standing all day. So we want to take that into consideration. Where my job, I might be sitting most of the day because I'm studying and because I'm writing material, but then I'm getting up, then I'm going to the chickens and playing with the chickens for a little bit. So my movement doesn't need as much of an off balance as it just needs activity. Can you see how the difference is kind of there? Where my significant other sits at a desk all day. He's got a desk job. He works for the government. So he sits at the desk all day. So what does that mean? Well, that means that he needs to be doing all 3 movements, because that would complete his lack of movement that he's doing in his life. So these are just little factors that kind of play a part in how we can grasp a concept of what we're doing. So even each day you can kind of say, okay, I still need a little bit of this at the end of the day. So if you sat all day, a little bit of yoga at the end of the day where you're doing some stretching to move in the opposite direction that you were in the whole time. So if I'm sitting all day, sometimes I'll sit and I'll have my legs straight on the couch with a little table. Jen will be standing all day. So Jen is probably going to want to stretch her hamstrings and stuff, where I'm going to want to be doing some more of like flowing movements to be able to counter that. So that even the movements would look different. All right, the benefits of exercise. And I know we hear this a lot, but I really do want you to hear it from the Ayurvedic point of view. So increase mental and physical stamina and strength, improve resistance to disease. So this is for the lymphatic system, which I'm going to have a whole series on because I'm completely obsessed with the lymphatic system because it's so weird. And that's what I love about it. It's not a normal system like the blood just does its thing. The lymphatic system is the weirdest system of the body because it doesn't have any like true veins or traveling things. It like disperses, which is really cool. It relieves tension, and we all know that, especially those of us that practice yoga. Like yoga is probably hands down the best exercise. Martial arts, Tai Chi, Qigong, those movements that are multi, so they hit the physical, mental, and emotional, spiritual aspects of everything. Improves circulation, so blood circulation, lymphatic circulation, digestive system circulation, our lung capacity. Aids in lymphatic flow and the elimination of waste via sweats, and then also via circulation and a lot of other ways. Lymphatic system is a little more complex. Improves the luster of your skin. So how many have exercised and afterwards you have that exercise glow? Improves your digestion, because a lot of times if we're sitting stagnant or if we're sitting like this, we're actually bothering our digestive system and crunching it all together and making it stagnant. Where exercise is going to move that, especially again, yoga, because we're doing all of these kind of movements. But walking can also do a lot too, because I know people that after they're walking in the morning, like, oh, I can finally have a bowel movement, where, you know, we need to be able to get that done before, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Combats inertia, so that feeling of tamasicness. Depression, anxiety, and laziness. Ayurveda is often a little harsh. If you read the Vedas, they're really funny because Chartika talks about disease and it's just super blunt how it translates. And I'm like, okay, that's just kind of not going to work. Ayurveda focuses less on the physical factors, physical physique factors, than it does the body's ability to be able to handle the cold, to handle the heat, to handle hunger, and to handle thirst. So we bend, we flex, and we firm without rigidity. So the effects of the body are naturally functioning. So the idea is to have functional exercise. So I'm sure some of us have heard about this functional exercise, the difference between functional and non-functional exercise. So exercise that we can actually applies into our day-to-day life. So if you go to the gym and you do bicep curls and you do tricep extensions, it's really not functional exercise, where a push-up is technically more of a functional exercise. And of course, I'm a big promoter of yoga for some reason, but it is definitely functional because the movements we're doing, maybe we don't do in the exact way, but the movements are necessary to be able to reach up and grab something out of the cabinet. And unless you're 6 foot tall, you probably can't reach the top part. So you have to go on your tiptoes. Well, you're gonna need your balance to be able to do that. So there's different parts of it they're so important. So again, emphasize the importance of yoga. So what makes exercise important? What is the thing that needs to be done? So in the morning, we want to do exercise after our evacuation. So ideally, you want to be able to get up, go to the bathroom, and then you start your day. So we want to evacuate. The reason is because if we look at the Ayurvedic clock, So we're detoxing. So last time we talked about the detoxification process that happens at night. So we go to bed at 10 p.m. or earlier, we detoxify our body starts to move it out of our system. First thing we want to happen is that we get it out of our system. We want to get it out of our system because those are toxins, straight up the nastiness in our body, anything from environmental toxins to just the byproduct of our body's waste movement. And we want to get it out of our body. We want to move our body no less than 30 minutes a day. Okay. And that can be a mixture of different exercises. So I've talked to one of my friends and she's like, I just feel so exhausted in the morning. And I'm saying, well, I know you don't want to hear this because she doesn't like exercising, but I go, how about you just do a 10-minute walk in the morning? But it has to be in the morning. That's it. And she goes, well, I can do that. I go, and it doesn't even have to be hard. Just get up and move 10 minutes in the morning. So I'm running a little social experiment on one of my friends, as I always do. You ask me questions, I'm going to give you information. So, and then oxygen into your life. So bring it into your body. So pranayama practices are really important here. Why? Why do we want to do things in a certain order? Why is this important? What will this lead to? And I'll get into details on all these topics in a little bit. But post-sleep, because at night our O2 levels are much, much lower. Okay, so in the morning we wake up, we have less blood flow, maybe even restricted blood flow. We have lower oxygen levels. We have a lot of stagnant in our body because our body is either properly detoxified, so it's sitting in our colon and in our bladder, or our body didn't detoxify properly and it's stuck stagnant in our brain and stagnant everywhere else in our body. So we want to make sure that we move in the morning to get things pumping. When you do, you will feel light, grounded, open, and energized. So again, if you feel exhausted after exercise, you're not doing the right things or you're not doing the right balance of things. And then the whole philosophy of use it or lose it. As we age, things change. And too often people are using this excuse, oh, I'm just getting old. Well, there's some valid information with that. But at the same time, if you don't kill your body in your 40s, especially, 40s is a big time to be able to make some huge lifestyle changes. 50s work, 60s work. If you start doing it earlier than that, you're gonna be a lot better off in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. But if we don't start getting some structure around our exercise at whatever age we're at, by the time we get into our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we won't have that structure and we will fall into illness and disease. And none of us want that. Otherwise, we'd all be out rubbing cheeks with everybody right now in society. But instead, most of us are pretty much home all the time, right? All right. How? So we want to start it before breakfast. So we want to make sure that we're exercising before breakfast. Minimum 5-10 minutes, but even some pranayama works pretty well, especially if you're starting basic. But if you really need to start getting movement, use the pranayama as part of your exercise. Make sure that when you're going out for your walk, you're going at a little bit greater stride or greater movement than just an evening stroll. But make sure that you're breathing through your nose. So let that dictate how fast you go. That's what I do in the morning. So I was a runner, obviously long distance runner, and I would huff and puff and push my way through everything and run with athletes that were better than me so that I could get better. Not necessarily cut time, but just to be able to not suffer so much. And it helped. Sure, it served its purpose at the time, but now I look at exercise as, how do I really feel? So if I go out with my intention to run and I just feel out of breath the whole time, obviously something in my body is not going right, because that's not normal. So what happens is that I then walk, and I walk to the point where, okay, my breath is under control. I can breathe through my nose the whole time. And then I start jogging again. And then if I have to walk again, I start walking again. So I let my breath decide, because that's the main factor, because it connects to our heart, connects to our lungs, it connects to every physical cell, versus letting my mind run my workout. So it's a little bit different philosophy. And I can talk a lot more about that sometime, but I won't get into it anymore this time. Movement is important. So movement, connection with breath. All right. Any quick questions. All right, so Ayurveda and yoga focus on kind of the same philosophy as far as exercise goes to an extent, okay? So if we're talking about Ayurvedic yoga versus Western yoga, it's a little bit different. So Ayurvedic yoga looks at, again, constitution's different. We focus on movement differently, but what we say is that the Ayurvedic clock takes law. So nature takes law first. When we follow the gunas, so rajas, tamas, and sattva. So rajas is movement, tamas is stagnation, and sattva is balance. So we'll keep it simple like that. There's a whole nother lecture on that topic. But in the morning, we're in a tamasic state. We're also in the kapha time of day. So where our body is going to be more heavy, more lethargic. Even if you wake up bright, shiny, bushy-tailed, it's still the optimal time to exercise and to move. This time is the worst time because you're just going to build more heat. But we want to build that heat in the morning, whether it's just doing yoga and just getting everything moving, or whether you're going out for a run or doing my 8-minute workout, that you get your blood going and you actually get to a point of like, whew, I'm almost out of breath, or I have a sense of not being able to breathe through my nose. In my case, that's how I calibrate it. And then we want to use rajastic type movement, which normally we don't want to introduce that kind of thing in, but we have to, the only way to move a tamasic behavior, so stagnation, is to introduce activity and movement. So then we introduce something that's rajastic. So running, yoga, something to move the body. And again, we want to move the body right away in the morning because we want to get that stagnant energy out. We don't want kapha to linger, because if kapha lingers, it's just going to make things much, much worse for the rest of the day. It's going to have you drink more coffee in the morning. It's going to have different eating aspects. So exercising in the morning will help you for the rest of the day and before you have breakfast. Then we introduce prana into it. So we focus on, okay, tamasic behavior, stagnant. We introduce rajastic, so the movement, and then we introduce prana. So prana is a life force. The life force, the vitality of life is prana. And we want to introduce that. So when we infuse proper breathing, we also incorporate all of our cells in that. So we create more importance around movement and exercise. And it is the idea of adding prana is to be able to bring us to that sattva state. So when you get done exercising, your mind feels bright, you feel alive, you have that little bit of glow. It might be just sweat, but it's a little bit of glow. And you actually feel happier. So, and we also push the morning exercises because we want to connect with nature. So ideally you do the exercise outside. Is that always going to happen? Not always for most people in the northern climate. All right, there's some of us that exercise even when it's 20 below outside, but it's going to look very different than when it's 60 and sunny. So we want to make sure we connect with nature. The more we connect with nature in the morning, the more it resets our circadian clock. So our body says, hey, yo, system, evening system, shut down, and morning system, it's time to kick up because we need to be awake. We need that little bit of cortisol jolt to stop and quit melatonin, not necessarily production unless your body is really out of whack, but we want to make sure that production of, or that the movement of melatonin, because melatonin tells our body what? That the night shift is coming through. And then we have a little bit of cortisol release to be able to say, hey, yo, it's time to be on daytime crew. So we hit that daytime crew and we have energy in the morning. And it also helps us to sleep at night. And a lot of times I go for a little walk at night, but it's definitely a stroll. It is not a workout by any means, meaning anybody could walk with me at that time of night, no matter how tall or short they are. Not in the morning though. Good luck trying to keep up. Let's see, anything else on this? Awesome. I got it just a little bit more, Jen. Is that okay? You okay? Okay. I'm going to skip some of this. Okay, I'm going to go to the two philosophies, the two different ideals. So the two different ideals, according to Ayurveda, and I think Western should definitely take this into consideration, is that we want to trust our intuition, our interests. And this is the intelligence. This is if we are connected with our body. We can do it with intelligence, and we can do it to evolve in our life. But if we don't listen, then we should do exactly the opposite. So one thing is to trust yourself. And if you don't trust yourself, then you better do just the opposite of what you think you should be doing for exercise. So this is an example for like a hardcore pitta. They always think they have to exercise till they're basically bleeding. And that's when we want to say, you should probably do just the opposite and do some light yoga and some meditation and some meditative movements, some meditative yoga, instead of doing the hard, vigorous exercise all the time. And it's pretty much life-changing for them, but a little hard to grasp at the beginning. And they usually fight with me a lot. So the three major components, again, are focusing on physique, stamina, and flexibility. Not physique in the sense of you have to look like a perfect epitome, whatever that is nowadays. It's so different. But the idea is that you have strength to be able to do your day-to-day, or to be able to do things maybe just a little beyond at times. So maybe being able to do work in your yard, just to be able to consistently live your life without too much struggle. I mean, if you're moving a couch that's too heavy or a refrigerator, that's one thing. But if you can't move a vacuum cleaner, like that's a whole nother thing. So making sure that you can do what you need to do. Stamina, that you have the endurance to be able to stay up from 6 till 10-ish, respectively. So we talked a lot about the Ayurvedic clock and how that can shift a little bit. Like Jenna gets up a little earlier and she goes to bed a little bit earlier. I'm a little bit on the other, well, kind of on the other end. I just don't sleep quite as long. And the focus is hard, soft, and move. So some of my teachers talk about hard, soft, and move. So hard would be strengthening, building, contracting muscle. Soft would be flexible, opening, and stretching. Move would be sustaining practice, so pumping blood and moving the body. I added another one, so I call them resistance, strength, stretch, and endurance is what I call them. And then I add in their lifestyle, so an active life, meaning again, instead of taking the elevator, take the stairs. Those simple little things add in that little bit of extra element of exercise. All right. I want to get to this last thing. So breakdown tools. So the tools that you can use, the idea is that you have the tools throughout your life so that you can live to be in your 80s and 90s and still be moving versus in a nursing home right now. Because who wants to go to a nursing home? Not me. All right, totally not going to a nursing home, especially since this is going on. Would I ever want to be? No. So the best way to do that is to take as good a care of this vessel as possible. And it doesn't mean pampering it either. It still means challenging it in different ways, mentally and physically, okay? Too often we forget about the mental portion. You still have to challenge yourself mentally. Was I telling you about that, Jenna, that there was a 90-year-old woman that was still learning brand new things? And I was just like, that's amazing. Oh, we were talking about that. So using your mind, learn new things. I was talking to one of my clients about this too. Her mother is 92 years old. 91 or 92 years old. And she's learning foreign languages right now, 3 of them. That's fascinating at 90-some years old. And who knows if she'll ever use it, but she's still using her brain. And I've met her, she's fantastic. So we want to make sure that we're using our brain too, but we want to also make sure we're using our body. Use it or lose it. So tools, prepare before bed. So making a setup to make it possible. Guys are usually pretty good about this because if they're going to go to the gym in the morning, they'll have their bag packed already. I say guys because any guy that I've dated or been around, if they're gym goers, they've already got things packed and ready to go. I'm not usually that way, but I have gotten more that way now. My shoes are by the door. I don't have to be that structured. I don't struggle as much with that part of it. The yoga portion I did. So the meditation, I leave my meditation cushion out. I leave my meditation pad, my bench out. So build the practice around the practice. Visualization, visualize yourself doing the movements. So at night before you go to bed, just say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Set an intention basically for the next morning to get up and to do that. Same time. So keep things as consistent as possible. Once you decide that you're you're going to be distracted by work, it will take priority. So make sure that it's the first thing that you do in the morning. Make sure it's after you hydrate and you have a bowel movement. So if you have difficulties having a bowel movement, focus on the hydration first, because more than likely that will help. A lot of dehydration definitely plays a part in when you're going to have your bowel movement in the morning. So hydrate, lemon water. We discussed that at one of the first classes. Be consistent. So Western is big on make sure you're doing three times a week. Da 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 da. I would say that every single day is by far more important than going to the gym for an hour and a half, three times a week. Jenna, would you agree with that? And you can just give me a thumbs up. Yep, she does. Plan, goal, and track. So some of us, depending on our constitution, although I'd highly recommend this with everybody, is you plan, you set goals, and you track what you're doing. So for me, I just have my Google Calendar, and I have it in there, and then I give myself a little smiley face if I do it, and then I erase it if I didn't. So then I have things set up to be able to be goals. So that works good enough for me. Some of you will be able to write it down on a calendar and have a checklist. Just depends on what your thing is. And again, I can help you through this stuff. Start now. So often we say, oh, I'll just start on Monday, or I'll make a New Year's resolution. No time like the present. So start making the changes now. And then what do you enjoy? And if you're already doing that, maybe it's time to switch things up a little bit. Listen to your body. We talked about this earlier. Mix it up. So variety is important. So having the 3 or the 4, counting my lifestyle aspects, is really important. So build the strength, endurance, flexibility, and then have some lifestyle stuff. Go for a walk with your family, whatever that may be. Expand, learn something new. Maybe there's something you're curious about and you've been waiting, and maybe now it's time to take the online class to be able to learn something new, or whatever, or find a coach or teacher. All right. So much more I could have talked about, of course, but we want Jenna to have some time. So Miss Jenna, it is you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, just kind of piggyback off of Cami first. For functional movement, I wanted to talk about moving your spine. So in our yoga practice, we do this a lot, where we do twisting, forward fold, back bends, and side to side movement. And it's because we do a lot of forward and not really a whole lot of back bending, but we do a lot of forward folds. So you want to make sure in your exercise and in your movement that you do back bends. We don't do as much twisting as our ancestors used to do. So we want to make sure you get in some twisting, and then side to side movement for the sides of our body. So we lengthen out the muscles in between our ribs, so we're able to breathe a little bit better. And then, so mindful movement is huge, especially for me right now. I have not been doing a lot of exercising, not because I pretty much only do yoga. So it's not like I added a lot more to my day, but I have lost 15 pounds in 2 months. And that is very significant because I haven't made that many changes. And so I've been doing the very rigorous exercising yoga in the morning, where I do Cami's Rise and Shine at 7 o'clock, and that's a little bit easier. And then I do her on-demand classes that she does, a yoga flow class, and that is the most difficult class of the week. So and just doing that, so I'm not doing the hard, vigorous yoga every single day. I am able to switch it up and get a little bit more mind-body connection on the days that she's doing her Rise and Shine. And then on the other days, I am focused more on the physical aspect of yoga, with a little bit of pranayama in there too, of course. So there is that little bit of mix that is just the perfect balance, especially for me, probably for a lot of other people. So you have that balance. And then exercise in the morning and the afternoon for yoga would be, yoga in the morning would be more flow, vinyasa type, longer holds, and then use restorative and yin at night to use kapha time and slowing down, and you're able to just slow down your body and you're able to go to sleep more. Yeah. Cami, that's pretty much all I had. Do you have anything more to add? You talked about everything.
I know, right? Give my yoga plug. Usually I try to stay away from the yoga plug in Ayurveda, but when they're talking about exercise, like, I believe that this is really a misunderstood component of exercise and of physical wellness, is that Westerners focus so hard on like hard yoga classes or super light yoga classes and don't mix that up even. And then the focus is on just the asana practice. The exercise portion is, we do need that physical movement, but the pranayama is the most important part of the yoga practice, because the breath, if you're holding your breath during your asana practice, it doesn't matter anyway. So working on being able to grasp the concept, but like yoga does everything: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And Jen and I, as teachers, we practice more of the spiritual aspect, but definitely move our bodies. So the idea is that we really center in and we really try to bring our students to a point of really connecting with themselves, because if you're not connected with yourself, then yoga is just another form of Western exercise, and we don't want that. And there's plenty of studios that do that, and that's great. That's their choice. We have decided to make the choice to make ours more of a spiritual, mental, emotional connection, along with the physical aspect, to move our bodies. And that's why if you ever join our classes, they are different. We still have some of the basic poses, not like we reinvented the wheel, but our focus within those poses are different. So yeah. Anything else, Jenna?
I don't think so.
All right, we've got a couple more minutes. I still have plenty of stuff to talk about. I look up there, I'm like, well, I didn't get to that. Hey, you have to ask yourself a few questions. So I have a few questions you can kind of consider as you're trying to figure out what to do for a workout. And I would highly recommend, we're going to be offering, Jen and I are going to be offering some Pick Your Brain courses, meaning we'll have a tea party in the morning, so you can have tea or coffee, whatever you'd like. And then in the evening, we're going to have bring your own beverage. So that beverage really can be anything. I'm not going to judge you if you have a glass of wine. If you have a bottle of wine, I may a little on the backside. But we're going to offer Pick Our Brain. So it's either community building where we hang out and talk, or you can ask us questions. And Jenna's very informative when it comes to meditation. And she knows a lot about yoga because she's been doing the thing with me for quite a long time. And then, of course, about Ayurveda and any of this stuff. And I would love to hear different topics that you guys want to discuss. So in the platform for the course, please make sure that you put in there what else you'd like to hear. But I've got a few questions you can ask yourself. So ask yourself this: what do you gravitate towards? So what exercise do you tend to gravitate toward? So is it more strengthening, more stretching, more endurance, or is it lifestyle type stuff where you're very, very active? What do you feel you need more of? After hearing this, what category do you feel you need a little bit more in? What change can you make this week? I've got one that I'm working on, because I was talking about this in the beginning, is I do my meditation first and then my yoga, unless I teach a class earlier, then it might be, or I have a client earlier, then it might be yoga and then meditation after that. Meditation, pranayama, I put those together. But I'm realizing I may have to start doing my exercise earlier in the morning. So I'm trying to figure out how that's going to look. And it might be just a little bit different every day, but I still am doing exercise because I'm teaching classes. So it would be working around that. So what change can you make this week? So there's a philosophy by BJ Fogg, and it's called, he's a behavioral scientist at Stanford University, and he calls it behavior design system. So being able to design your behaviors. And his idea is be specific, make it easy, and then this will help trigger the behavior. So mine is kind of the same as his, is you make a plan, be specific in that plan, and then make it as easy as possible. And if you need help and tools along that way, that's what we're here for, okay? And we have so many different ideas. I've tried so many different things. I'm sure in Jenna's life, even though she hasn't been on the planet as long as me, I'm sure she's tried plenty of things. to be able to create activity or gotten off the bandwagon as far as activity. Mine has been on the extreme end. So I did all the extreme stuff, and the difference between them, being a collegiate athlete, I tore everything up. I didn't have to have surgeries. I should have on my right shoulder, but I rehabbed it with yoga. So looking at that, I did ultra marathon running, and I didn't really have any problems. I'd heat exhaustion once and I had hypothermia once, but it was the extremes. It was 110 and it was cold. So those are a little bit beyond. But as far as like my physical health, I didn't get extremely depleted. And even when I met with my teachers, they're like, we don't understand how you are doing what you're doing, because you should be just thin and depleted. Your menstrual cycle shouldn't be normal. Because I run at about, I mean, my body fat runs very, very low. So I've always had under 15%. And sometimes I'm at about 9 or 10%. So that means that I shouldn't have a menstrual cycle. I've never had a problem with that. So that's significant in looking at the whole aspect of Ayurveda. Is like, in traditional Ayurveda, they're huge on no distance running, no high caliber athletics. Those of us that are more on the Eastern Western side of Ayurveda are like, well, there's a lot of evidence proving now that if you do good pranayama techniques and you learn how to breathe through your nose, you're actually not depleting your system, but you're supporting your system to be more capable of adapting. And you don't go into the fight or flight response. If you're breathing through your nose, your body does not go into fight or flight, only when you start breathing through your mouth. And then there's the whole philosophy on breathing through your nose as far as COVID goes. So I did a whole lecture on that. And if you are part of my free membership, which I believe all of you are, check out the free membership, because on there I have a lecture on the immune system. It's a little bit outdated because I did that early in COVID. So the later stuff that's come out is a little different. It's not that anything's wrong. There's just more information around it. And I probably should do another one. I'll probably do another one. Oh, I'm doing another one in a couple weeks. Right, Jenna? Yeah, I'm doing the immune system, lymphatic system in a couple weeks. Oh yeah, so I'm doing another one. But we're going to get the stuff up on the calendar. We've got a bunch of workshops coming up. I think we've got us planned through the end of October for different Wellness Wednesday events. And we're going to promote them a little bit differently. So for those of you that are a part of the 30-day Ayurvedic challenge, I'm not loving the whole classroom idea. It seems to be a little too confusing. So I'm going to figure out ways of getting it on my website without dragging my website down. So the idea was that I was going to separate things so that I could keep my website fast, but I just bought a server. So I think I got it covered, but we'll see. So I'll figure that out over the next few weeks in preparation for the next few programs that are coming out. But if you have any questions, you can ask. I know Jenna's on her way to work to teach a class, but if you have any questions for me, you can ask, or whatever. And you can type them up. You should be able to type up in the chat if you'd like. All right, you can always access me via email, camislagers@gmail.com. That will be changing in the next few weeks as we get our emails set up on when shift happens. But as of now, I will always be a way to get a hold of me. So camislagers@gmail.com. And we would love to answer any questions that you have, or any concerns, or any feedback would be great too. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks. Bye.